Welcome everyone. My name is Bradley Cusack and we're so glad you joined our microlearning webinar today. If you've attended our previous webinars, you may notice this one looks a tad different. We have upgraded to the Zoom webinar feature for this event. Before we get started, let's watch this short housekeeping video so that we're all on the same page.
Welcome. We're excited for you to join us for this K20 Center Zoom webinar. To get the most out of your webinar experience, let's go over a few things. First, make sure you can hear the facilitator's voice. If not, you may have to check your sound settings. Also, locate the chat window. This is where you'll add your questions and comments during the webinar. You can also decide whether your messages will be sent to just the panelists and facilitator or to everyone. Make sure you know where the raise hand button is. You may be prompted to use this feature during the webinar. If there's a Q&A session scheduled in your webinar, know where the Q&A button is. There, you can ask a question, and either the panelists or the attendees can answer you. This webinar will be recorded. An email will be sent out with a link to the video. Thanks for joining us today. If you have any questions at all, be sure to ask them to your facilitator in chat.
We will be using the chat feature quite frequently today, so let's take a moment to get to know the chat functions. If you go to the bottom of your screen and click on the word chat, we can practice by sending a chat to all panelists and attendees. In the chat box, let us know where you're watching the webinar from today. All right, Randy from Oklahoma City, Shelly from Oklahoma City, somebody from Vian, Dixon, Broken Bow, War Acres, San Diego, Muldrow, Blanchard, Clinton, Oklahoma, Stillwater, Sand Springs, Norman. It's so much fun to see where everybody is joining from today. I'd also like to take this opportunity to introduce Kiana, who is driving our webinar today, and Kathy, who will be running tech support for us. If you need assistance from Kathy, please message her by selecting the Q&A button, typing in the available field, and clicking send. Also, I have the phenomenal K20 professional development team helping to moderate the chat box. That said, welcome to the Virtual Meeting Etiquette webinar. We have a brief but action-packed agenda for you today with strategies, routines, and expectations that we hope will help you with your classes as we discuss today's topic, virtual class meeting etiquette. To get us thinking about this topic, let's use the K20 Learn strategy, Stoplight Sticky. We will be completing this digitally with Mentimeter. Let us know how virtual class meetings have been going for you. The easiest way to do this is on your smartphone, but you can also get to the Mentimeter in one of three ways: the short link, the QR code, or the direct link. So, how do you feel about how it's been going? Choose the corresponding color on Mentimeter to let us know how you feel about virtual class meetings. So if you're feeling, please send help, mark the red option. If you're hanging in there, select the yellow option. And if you're handling everything like a rock star, select the green option. While everybody gets a chance to vote, let's talk about Mentimeter. Mentimeter is an interactive polling tool that you can use in your classroom for quick formative assessments. Like many EdTech tools, it contains both free and paid options. This tool would be an engaging resource for the beginning of your class meetings to check in on student well-being, to quickly assess where students are at in different tasks, or something just as simple as a quiz. So it looks like the results are coming in. The majority of our participants are in the yellow area, but we also have a pretty decent split for red and green, with 35% of our participants, 38 now feeling like they're rock stars, and 22% saying, send help. So for our red and yellow teachers, I think that we're going to have some useful resources for you to bring to your classes during this webinar. There will also be an opportunity later for our green teachers to share some of their expertise with the group. So as we learn more about virtual class meeting etiquette, let's keep in mind this guiding question: what might a successful virtual class meeting look like? Just like in the classroom, one of the most important foundations is setting a clear expectation of how students can participate and what they can expect from their teacher. So what is expected of the teacher? Just as in the classroom, you have responsibilities for ensuring your students' success. First is attendance. To ensure meeting attendance, it is important to include more than one invitation and more than one type of invitation to your virtual class meeting. Don't assume students know where to go. Redundancy is key. Some examples of multiple invitation types could include you sharing your meeting link in Google Classroom, if you're using Classroom, in an email or in a calendar invite, or even on the Remind platform. And remember to remind them more than once. These practices will ensure students will get to the right place and will become less necessary as the meeting routine becomes established. Then, an agenda. Just like in the classroom, it's important to have an agenda posted somewhere for students to reference. We did this for you at the beginning of our webinar with a simple screenshot posted on the slide for our agenda. Students, just like us, like to see what is going to be taught, to reference where in the lesson we are and how much time is left. This is also a good way to have all the links and necessary materials for your meeting in one place. You could accomplish this with a PDF or a Google Doc posted in Classroom or whatever platform you're using. And again, redundancy. It never hurts to link it in the chat. Next is limiting distractions. So begin your meeting by limiting distractions. Notice how I have chosen a tidy space to conduct this meeting. You could use a similar environment or even use the virtual background or blur features on your video chat. Additionally, mute students as the class meeting begins. We'll discuss muting students in more detail shortly. Safety. As teachers, one of our goals is to create a safe learning environment for our students. We need to do that virtually as well. Technology safety protocols exist for this, such as using the waiting room feature, which is now on by default for Zoom, so students can only join the meeting when you are present and ready, by password protecting your meetings, and by creating new meetings instead of reusing old meetings or meeting IDs. Norms. Setting norms for participation will be different from teacher to teacher if you design the norms or if you collaborate with students to generate the norms, but much of this will be the same as what you did in the classroom. It will be important to address this, if you haven't already, to remind students of the new normal class expectations. The poster that we're displaying now shows some sample virtual class meeting norms. We considered several elements that you will also want to consider when generating your class norms, such as what preparation, attention, engagement, and polite behavior all look like. These include important student meeting etiquette features such as how to participate, when to mute or unmute your mic, and camera use. We have included a copy of our digital norms poster for you in a resource document, which is being linked in the chat now, and will also be sent out in a follow-up email. Finally, social and emotional needs. Another consideration is the social and emotional needs of your students. It would be worth thinking about including a time in your meetings for students to socialize, to share their concerns. If you do this before the meeting, the time can serve a dual purpose for you to help troubleshoot technology issues that students may encounter. So let's take a moment now to share out about teacher etiquette during class meetings with another K20 Learn strategy, commit and toss. We will be using a modified digital version of this exercise. None of us know everything, and we certainly haven't covered everything about teacher expectations for virtual meeting etiquette. In the chat, post a response to the following question. What is something that you've learned about conducting virtual class meetings that would be beneficial to share with everyone today? I love getting the opportunity to see what my peers are doing because you guys are doing such innovative and amazing things during this crisis. So Lindsay says, norms can be super helpful for learning and for safety. Mandy says to welcome students by name as they enter the virtual class. That's a great idea. It's the same idea as standing outside your door before class begins. Kathy says to send virtual reminders of your meetings. Randy says, for me, teaching virtually seems to take longer. I've learned to slow down, not to rush, and that's absolutely true. Tracy says that an agenda is great. Nikki says that kids must use their real name when entering the meeting to avoid unwanted guests, and that's a great point. Shayna says to check for understanding. Danny says, assume that the whole family is there too, and that's a great point. And Anne, post in classroom and remind them earlier or use different technologies. So thank you guys so much for your suggestions. Those are all great. So we're going to move on now to student expectations. It's great to have high expectations of our students, but realize that the virtual classroom and virtual meetings is new territory for many of our students. You're going to need to model and scaffold many of the behaviors and expectations that you have for your students. So first of these is muting. Students are going to have less control over their home environment, especially if they have family members that are working or learning from home. One expectation that can be set is that students will mute their microphones. This is not to silence the student voice, but to control the learning environment and limit distractions. Participation. How then will students participate? There are several ways. You can call on them and they will unmute. They can use predetermined gestures to signal needs like, I have a question or I'd like to add to that. And features are even built into meeting platforms like the raise hand feature or the chat function. Engagement. It will be important for students to be active participants. One way to accomplish this is for them to take notes on paper or on a digital medium like Google Docs. Another example is that students can show their engagement physically with thumbs up and thumbs down, or virtually with green check marks and red X's within the video platform. And finally, there are many ways for students to participate that are respectful of where they're coming from. Some students may not want to have their video on all the time, and that's okay. Their home environment could be host to any number of scenarios, like playing siblings. Work out a method with these students to show video in a way that is appropriate, like, hey Johnny, could you turn your video on and give me a wave real quick? This serves a dual purpose of providing inclusion to that student and also allowing you to quickly check if they're engaged in your class meeting. All right, speaking of engagement, let's see if you're still engaged. Let's reflect and use a 6-word memoir. The 6-word memoir is an exercise in brevity where students must describe a topic in just 6 words. Circling back to our guiding question, let us know in the chat what a successful virtual meeting would look like for you in just 6 words. While you process and share, I'll reflect on some of the ways that I've used the 6-word memoir in my classes. I've used it as an icebreaker where students have to introduce something important about themselves, for novel study where students have to summarize a character or a chapter, or even as we're doing now, where students have to reflect on an essential question based on their understanding of the lesson. So we're having some responses come in here. Kathy says all students are engaged in learning. Polly says everyone is engaged in the lesson. Mandy says creating an interactive and engaging space. Rebecca says, ooh, there we go, chat's flying down. Engaged, participating, reflective, critical thinking students. Shayna says students feel connected to the learning. Heather says 6-word memoirs is one of my faves. Liana West says everyone engaged, participating, and paying attention. Nikki says all students attend and are actively engaged. Lori says students can summarize the objectives, and there's quite a few more. Thank you guys so much for your responses and for taking time to really reflect on your learning today. I'd like to transition now to our Q&A section. So as we wrap up today's webinar, are there any questions that you have? Type yours in the chat box. While everyone processes and generates their questions today, I'd like to share a few things with you. First, we've tried to model all of the elements of successful class virtual meeting etiquette in our meeting today that we could, minus the audio-visual elements due to the constraints of the webinar. Second, the resource document that we shared for you is filled with all of the resources from today's webinar, links to all of the learn strategies that we've used, a copy of the slides presentation, and links to articles and websites that you might find useful. All right, so I'm looking at some of the questions now. Will this recording be available to watch again? Absolutely. We're going to have 2 options. One will be for you to access it through this platform through Zoom. We'll also be putting it on YouTube. The chat's just flying through. I'm having difficulty keeping it where I need it. How many invitees are ideal? So for a normal class, like if it's your normal class size, I would say anywhere between 15 and 30. Like the way that the number of students that you have is going to change the format of interactivity, but you can always use features on Zoom like breakout rooms to give students a smaller, more intimate space to work together. Stephanie Conine says scavenger hunts are great icebreakers. That's absolutely true. Other icebreakers that I like to use, like we mentioned, 6-word memoirs. I also like to use 2 truths and a lie. That's a really fun and easy one. Let's see here. What are other ways to motivate or encourage students to join virtual class meetings? That's a tricky one because student motivation is a little bit different from place to place, but like inclusion, like creating social presence during your initial meetings is going to be the big piece, making them feel like it's a place where they can be heard, where they're included, and then gradually shifting to increasing the cognitive demand and the teaching demand for both the teacher and the students. All right, it looks like the questions are kind of winding down. So on behalf of everybody at the K20 Center, I'd like to thank you for spending your lunchtime with us. I hope you guys have a great day.